Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the 8th house. We're nearing the end of the Vimshottari Nakshatra Dasha course here on this YouTube channel. If you've missed the previous videos, you can go back through. I believe they're under the playlist right now, the Nakshatra Dasha's free course. So we cover planetary dashas, we cover the houses as we're doing now, and also general principles. But for now, we're going to go ahead and move on to the 8th house and influences of the 8th house. Remembering that this is coming from Sarvarta Chintamani primarily. I throw in some information based on what I know of other texts like Parashara and so on. But for now, what does Sarvarta Chintamani say about the 8th house? Well, he lists the 8th house as being involved with longevity, death, issues of the rectum. So I suppose we'd put Uranus into the 8th house. Mode of death, enjoyment of food, service, being bitten, and defeat. Now, there are numerous phrases that are given in Sarvarta Chintamani. I'm not going to go through them all because we don't have time to do all that, but I will be putting them up on my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, along with this video, so you can go read about them there. There's quite a bit more about death of the father, death of the mother, loss of battles, diseases, things of this nature, so you can go check all those out there, but we'll get through as many as we can today. Now, one of the first questions that arise is, why does the 8th house have the reputation that it does? Why does it deal with things, other things like the occult, the taboo, astrology, inheritance, in-laws, and so on? One of the major things we have to be aware of with the 8th house is where is it positioned within the chart. So if we have the 7th house, which is the house of the body of our partner and our sexual relationships, then we have the 8th house, which is the deeper connection. So it's that bond that one is able to form through those sexual relationships within the marriage, that deeper marital connection. And this is important because we go from the 7th to the 8th to the 9th. The 9th house is a house of grandchildren. The 9th house, along with the 5th, is the house of how our legacy continues within the world. It could be children, or it could simply be how we live our life, our dharma. And if we rewind and we look at the 5th house, so the 5th house is oftentimes related to romance and that initial love that we feel for someone else. And oftentimes it's that initial romance and love which produces our children. Okay? And then from there, we move into the 7th house, which is deepening the partnership. And then we move into the 8th house, which is deepening that conjugal bond between mates. And then from there, if we treat our family correctly, then we'll get to the 9th house, which is our grandchildren, and those things that will flow from us in regards to how we lived our life and how we worked with others through partnerships. So what we've built, essentially. So think of it this way. 5th house is romance. 5th house is what attracts you to your partner. 5th house shows how you approach romance. We get to the 7th house, which is the actual sexuality that we experience within a relationship. So intercourse. We get to the 8th house. In the 8th house, we're deepening that bond. And finally, we get to the 9th house, where we've built our family, and now we can share our principles, our dharma, with our children, our grandchildren, our culture. So if you think about things in this way, it can sometimes give you a little more detailed insight in regards to the particular houses that you're thinking of. All right, now let's go ahead and look at these phrases we have here. So Sarvarta Chintamani states that the Lord of the 8th, located in the 12th, with Malefics gives one a short life. This is also true if the 8th is in the 6th, under the influence of Malefics. And we'll be using this chart here on the, I suppose that's your left. What's one of the first things that Sarvarta Chintamani states about the 8th house? He says that the Lord of the 8th, located in the 12th, with Malefics, gives one a short life. This is also true if the 8th is in the 6th, under malefic influences. So the 8th Lord deals with our longevity, our life force. We put it in the 12th 12th deals with loss, taking away of things from our life experience. So that can be, in a sense, loss of life. So if it's under malefic influences in the 12th, and he specifically qualifies that under or with malefic influences, that gives a short life. So let's look here. We have the Lord of the 8th, which is Venus, in the 8th, which is good. It's in its own home. We see it's with Mercury, which that Mercury is acting like Saturn because it's closer to Saturn than it is to Venus. And it's with Saturn, a malefic. So what does that tell us? That's going to give some difficulty maintaining their life. So they're going to have to do what's required of Saturn to have a long life, such as work hard at it. If they don't, they'll be more inclined to have a short life. They'll have to work with Mercury, which is your capacity to manage your health and your longevity, and to live in such a way as to support a long, healthy life. Mercury deals with managing those things. We'll have to work with Mercury in that regard. Now, Sarvarta Chintamani also says the Lord of the 8th and that of the first house together in the 6th or the 12th, and under benefic aspect gives long life, or the lords of the 6th and 12th in the first under benefic aspect gives one long life. So here we see the Lord of the 8th and that of the first together in the 6th or the 12th, and under benefic aspects give long life. Why? Because we have the 6th house, which represents our digestive tract, our disease tendencies in general, under benefic influences. We see someone working hard to be healthy, and if you work hard to be healthy, more than likely you'll live a long life. Or the lords of the 6th and 12th in the first under benefic influences. Again, we see 6th house lord being well supported, 12th house lord being well supported, in the first, which deals with the body, which can help sustain long life. Now, good longevity is also given by the Lord of the 10th being located in a friendly sign or in the sign of exaltation. The lords of the 10th and 1st and 8th and Kendras can confer a long life. Now, why is this? Good longevity is given by the Lord of the 10th being located in a friendly sign. So let's see what we have here. So in this chart, we have the Lord of the 10th, Jupiter, in a great friend sign, so it's in a friendly sign. And we even see the planet in the 10th house, Mars, is in a great friend sign. It's also a friend towards the ascendant, natural friend towards Jupiter. So this helps to confer long life. Now, why would this be the case? Because the 10th house is our karma, our activity in the world. And if our karma and activity in the world is supported, well, we have to be alive in order to do it, essentially. So that's one of the reasons. Now, the lords of the 10th, 1st, and 8th and Kendras can confer a long life. Again, I'd probably qualify that by saying in good dignity and under benefic supportive aspects. But why is this again? Well, the lords of the 10th and the 1st is our path in life, the quality of our direction in life. And the 10th is our activity, our karma. In Kendras, which are active houses, well, again, in order for you to be active in the world, you have to live a long time, typically. Not always. But the more activity that's indicated by your chart, the longer you will have to live. Which brings up that point that many people say that you'll live a lot longer if you have good purpose in your life. So if you don't have purpose in your life, give yourself a purpose. Make yourself a purpose. Don't worry about if your Lord of the 10th or 1st is in Kendra. Create your own purpose in this moment. Remember, the birth chart is only a reflection of the activities and karmas that you've put forth up until the moment you were born. So between then and now, you have time to put into play different karmas if you like. Now the 8th being in a Kendra, again, I would qualify that by saying in a good dignity. Why does this confer a long life? Well, the 8th house deals with managing our vitality, our life force. And if it's in a Kendra, it's in an active house, well, we're going to be actively involved in that thing. So what of the question about what does the 8th house represent? Well, according to Parashara, it represents longevity, battles, cheats, impassable strongholds, the wealth of the dead, the course of the soul after death. Now, why would this be the case? Because if we think about the 8th house, it's akin to the natural 8th sign of the zodiac, which is what? But Scorpio. And Scorpio is a house that deals with these things. It's a house that's represented by the scorpion that retreats into the earth, underground, into the split, the flaw, the cavity. Scorpio is also associated with psychological growth, inner transformation. And the question arises, why is it that this house is also said to represent the occult, and astrology, and the taboo? Well, the occult and astrology and things of this nature are not normal everyday things, meaning that the average individual isn't going to understand astrology or understand occult sciences. In fact, most of the people that pretend like they understand occult sciences actually don't. They're just good at talking about what they've heard. So this is kind of a taboo thing in that it's uncommon. And it's uncommon for people to understand the truth of the matter of these things. It's hidden. The 8th sign of the zodiac, Scorpio, is said to be a hidden house. We also need to consider the time of year when Scorpio is occurring. That's in the fall. We have Scorpio occurring between the end of October and the end of November. Tropical Scorpio. So it goes with the seasons. And what's typically happening during that season? Well, we have the leaves dying. We have winter coming. People are reaping their harvest. They're transforming the harvest of their life to be stored for later. They're going inward, again, preparing for winter. And psychologically, that can be preparing one's inner garden for greater growth, for greater internal development. Now, there is one more thing we can consider about Scorpio being the natural 8th sign of the zodiac, aside from the fact that fall occurs during that time, and we're moving towards winter, because that's only going to be actually true for the northern hemisphere. So what do we do about Australia in the southern hemisphere? Well, there's another way of looking at it. We can think of the North Pole as the home of the Devas, and the South Pole as the home of the Asuras. Again, this is mythological. And so as the sun moves northward, as we move from tropical Capricorn to tropical Cancer, it's as though we have the energy of the earth moving up towards the North Pole, towards the heavenly realms. In the same way, when we circulate life force through the spine using Kriya Pranayama, we are pulling our Shakti, or our spiritual energy, up to the higher brain regions, represented by the North Pole. And so with Scorpio, that's when the sun is moving from north to south, right? That's why we have the change of seasons. But if we just consider the planet and the poles, the sun is moving from north to south. And as the sun moves towards south, it's moving down into the more Ashuric realms, which are what considered to be more of the material realms. So when we get to Scorpio, we are now going below the earth. We're now going down into the Ashuric realms. So we can look at it as most people do who use the idea of the seasons, but that really only applies for the northern hemisphere, or we can think about it on this grander scale for the whole planet, which is one of the reasons why astrology in general, it is seasonal, but again, what it's really based on is the movement of the sun going north and then moving south again. So that causes seasons on the planet, but on a deeper level, on a more energetic level, that affects the psychology of one's being. And so when the sun is moving towards Capricorn, from Cancer to Capricorn, it's going down into the Ashuric realms. And again, we're not being judgmental about that, we're just talking mythologically. And the Asuras, we need them because they allow us to have material existence, which is a part of all of creation and all of consciousness, both materiality as well as infinite pure being. So keep that in mind. So Scorpio rules these things, and the 8th house is said to be associated with Scorpio because they have the same number. A lot of people associate the 8th house and Scorpio with sexuality. And as we've seen in the previous video, the 7th house is actually the one associated with sexuality and intercourse. The 8th house is associated with the conjugal bond, that which is created after you've married. And remember, in olden days, you were essentially married to anyone you had sex with. So once you've had sex with someone, in order to get to marriage, and what marriage actually means, supporting one another, we see you have to develop this inner safety with each other, this inner conjugal bond, this capacity to understand each other on a very deep level. So the 8th house isn't sexuality in the sense of just banging everybody. The 8th house is sexuality in that capacity to spend time in a very intimate way. And for sexuality to be fulfilling, some would argue that you have to be able to meet someone emotionally, psychologically. You have to be emotionally healthy and psychological yourself, which are all internal processes. Now, if natural malefics occupy the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th houses, and natural benefics occupy kendras and trines, and the Lord of the 1st is strong, the native enjoys full longevity. Now, natural malefics, these are the things that make us tough, that give us courage, 3rd house, that make us fight to overcome our debts, 6th house, that drive us to achieve our goals, 11th house. By having those natural malefics in the 3rd, 6th, and 11th, we'll naturally be driven to achieve our goals. Having natural benefics in kendras or trines, well, those are pleasant forces, which, when they're in the kendras, particularly the 10th house and 1st house, that gives us greater capacity to achieve our goals with more ease. If they're in trines, we naturally have grace to achieve our goals. So 3rd, 6th, and 11th, having malefics there, that makes us work hard to achieve our goals. Having benefics in the kendras or trines, that gives us either the activity or the grace to do it with more ease. So again, what we see is that the more purposeful your life is, the more likely you'll enjoy greater longevity. So if kendras contain benefic planets, and the Lord of the Lagna is with a benefic, and under aspect of Jupiter, one enjoys longevity. Well, kendras, again, the activity that we get ourselves involved in. Having benefics in kendras, that'll show us getting ourselves involved in, hopefully, gentler, more pleasant, less stressful areas of life. And we know stress can take away from our vitality, our longevity. The Lord of the Lagna with a benefic, and under the aspect of Jupiter, enjoys longevity. Well, the Lord of the Lagna represents the body. With a benefic, that helps to support the health and strength of the body. Under the aspect or in conjunction with Jupiter, well, Jupiter is the greatest benefic, and he is one of the greatest promoters of health, especially when he's in good dignity and not starved by Mercury or Venus or starved by Saturn. Now, if the Lord of the 8th house is in the 1st, under the aspect of Jupiter and Venus, or is associated with them, and the Lord of the 1st is in a kendra, one has a long life. I've already discussed this 1st Lord and kendra's angles. But the Lord of the 8th and the 1st, again, that gets our body involved in processes that sustain our longevity. Having that 8th and the 1st and under the aspect of the 2 great benefics, Jupiter and Venus, again, this helps to bring more grace and more support and more benefic influence to that of our body and to that of the Lord of the chart, the 8th Lord, which deals with our longevity. Now, if there are 3 planets in exaltation, the Lord of the 8th in the 1st, and no malefics in the 8th, one enjoys long life. So, if there are 3 planets in exaltation, the Lord of the 8th is in the 1st, and no malefics in the 8th, one enjoys long life. So here we have the 8th Lord supporting the 1st, and no innate weaknesses to the 8th. And for more thoughts on this, you might want to refer to, I believe we went over this in the Astrological Principles 1, 2, and 3 classes. So they're under the MP3 audio and video courses at AstralVedicAstrology.com, where we discuss planetary aspects, both Graha aspects and Rashi aspects. So you might want to review that when you're considering astrological themes such as this, because it'll help you see how having the 8th Lord or 8th house Rashi aspected by benefics, helpful planets, helps to support the foundation of that house. Having the 8th Lord Graha aspected by its friends, that will also help to support that 8th house. Now, if malefics are in kendras without the aspect of any benefics, and the Lord of the Lagna is weak, one is short-lived. Again, this is something we went over in the Astrological Principles 1, 2, and 3. I believe it's those. I'll have to double-check. But in those courses, those MP3 downloads, we see that the Ascendant Lord and the Ascendant serve as the foundation for the rest of the chart. So if it's strong, the whole rest of the chart works better. Even the bad things, you can work with them better. If it's weak, then the bad things really crush you, and the good things, they're harder to make good things out of, essentially. So this is following that kind of logic, that When the Lord of the Lagna is weak, one is short-lived. And if there are malefics and kendras, so putting these two things together, weak Lord of the Lagna, malefics and kendras with no benefic aspects, one is short-lived. Because malefics in the kendras or in the angles, that's going to get you involved in rough, stressful things. Now, it doesn't always have to be bad. That's why it qualifies it by saying without the aspect of benefics. If there are no benefic aspects on these kendras or on these malefics, then you just get the stress without the satisfaction the benefics give. And that can really wear a person down. So you don't have to even look at these as longevity. You can just see what is the status of one's capacity to be alive, full of life. The 8th house, the life bhava, the ayur bhava. So maybe it's not going to kill them, but they might wish they were dead. Or they might not enjoy their life so much with that kind of combination. So they'll have to do some kind of spiritual work to help with that. Meditation, particularly meditation, service and things of this nature to alter that karma. So longevity is of 3 types, and this is how it's defined. When someone says you've got short longevity, middling longevity, or long life, this is what these old books mean. Short life is up to 32 years. 32 to 69 is considered to be average, middle. Long life is 69 and above. So it seems like there are a lot of people living above 69. Again, this is what makes me think sometimes we might have to go back and reassess some of these older books to make them more up-to-date or more relevant to our time. But here we have now a listing of what's going to give short, middle, or long life. So if the Lagna Lord is an enemy of the sun, the longevity is short. If it is neutral, the longevity is middle. If it is a friend, the longevity is long. Now, if we think about that, and we just think about it shallowly, what's that going to tell us? An enemy to the sun. That means that Taurus, Libra, Capricorn, and Aquarius, anyone who has that ascendant is going to have a short life. And we know that's not true. And why do I say that? Because Venus rules Libra and Taurus, and Saturn rules these other 2 signs here. And they're enemies to the sun, naturally. But this is again where the necessary to understand the temporary friendships comes into play. Because they're going to tell us, they help us see that just because a planet is a natural friend or natural enemy, we need to see the temporary relationship. That's why not all Taurus, Libra, Capricorn, and Aquarius ascendants have a short life, right? So let's take a look here. So we have a Pisces ascendant. So if you've got Kala, you can go to the tables, find planetary relationships. And this will tell us what is the relationship of every planet to every other planet. Not just naturally, not just memorizing the natural relationships, but based on this chart, this specific chart. And everyone's chart's going to be different in this regard. So what do we see over here? We see that Jupiter is neutral to the sun. All right, in this particular chart, Jupiter is neutral to the sun. Why is that? Because Jupiter is a natural friend to the sun. We know that if you've studied the free course on this YouTube channel, or if you've read The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2. And we know that temporarily he's an enemy. Why? Because it's in the same sign as the sun. So it's neutral. So this will indicate a middle longevity, which is between 32 to 69 years. Now we can dial that in with some other techniques, but we know that they're at least going to make it to 32. Now long life is 69 and above. So we have the Lord of the Lagna as an enemy to the sun. This gives a short life. If it is neutral, the longevity is middle. If it is a friend, the longevity is long. Now, these are very basic statements. And remember, I like to use confluence, which is looking at different indications and seeing how they add up together. So you're going to find something says short life, something says long life, something says middle life. You need to find the indications that show up most often. Or if you have a question, you're wondering, is this person going to have a long life? Is this person going to have a middle life or a short life? And you've already looked at all these other things. You can use this as the, the tiebreaker in that regard. But you have to see how what direction does it all point towards. And you have to take the average of that as best you can, as best you know how. Now, one lives till middle age if the Lord of the Lagna is weak, Jupiter is in a Kendra or trine, and there are natural malefics in the 6th, 8th, or 12th. All right. Well, Lord of this lagna, I would not say is particularly weak. Jupiter is in a trine. There are natural malefics, at least one, in the 8th. All right, so that's not telling us so much about this chart, but that's one of the ways that you would look at this. If benefics occupy a kendra or trine, and Saturn is strong in a kendra or trine, malefics are situated in the 6th or the 8th, the yoga gives middle longevity. Now again, I'm sharing these with you. You can go to astrovedicastrology.com and see them, as I type them up for you. But for now, as we're listening, think about what I'm saying. Even pause the video after I make a statement and write down, think about why might this be the case. Logic it out for yourself. Rationalize it out for yourself, and that will help you learn astrology much better. Now, if both the lords of the 1st and the 8th are weak and are influenced by Mars, and the lord of the 6th house, the native dies in battle or by weapons. Now we're getting to the part where it's describing how might a person die. All right, so if both the lords of the 6th, if both the lords of the 1st and the 8th are weak and are influenced by Mars, and the lord of the 6th house, the native dies in battle or by weapons. So here we have the 1st house of the body, the 8th house of the 8th house of longevity, 1st house body, 8th house longevity, influenced by Mars, a planet that deals with battle and weapons. Death or injury could occur because of battle or weapons or sharp objects. If the lord of the 8th and the 1st are located in the 6th, with Rahu, Ketu, or Saturn, then in the main ruling period of the 8th, and the sub-period of the lord of the 1st, death takes place due to thieves or weapons. All right, so we have the 1st and the 8th located in the 6th. This is a combination which can give accidents and injury. With Rahu, Ketu, or Saturn. These are planets that deal with thieves. So someone trying to steal something from you, someone trying to rob you, you can get injured in that regard if you have this combination during the main ruling period of the lord of the 8th and the sub-period of the 1st, or the main ruling period of the 1st and the sub-period of the 8th. So if you know anyone who has had that happen, look at their chart and let me know how this works out for you. I personally don't know many people at all that have had this happen, so I have not been able to look at that. Some other thoughts about the 8th house. Why is it that the 8th house is said to represent inheritance, the in-laws, insurance, other people's money? Well, if you think about it, most traditional astrological texts are written for men. If you read them, they're always talking about the native being a he. Very often do they talk about, when they talk about spouse, the wife. They never ever say the husband, typically. Usually it's always from a man's perspective. And so for inheritance, well, inheritance or dowries, where do they come from? But the wife or the spouse's family. And in the birth chart, the 7th house is the spouse. The 2nd house from the 7th, which is the 8th, is one's immediate family. That's where the wealth and the inheritance comes from. Why does it represent the in-laws? Again, because the 2nd from the 7th, which is the 8th, shows the immediate family of the spouse. Does the 8th house have the ability to affect one's psychology? Well, most definitely. Because how you are able to connect to another on an intimate level is a direct reflection of how healthy you are internally psychologically. So again, tying this back to the idea of the conjugal bond, the capacity to be with and connect with another. You will only be able to do that if you yourself have excellent inner psychological health and psychological strength. So all these things are tied together. If the lord of the 1st and the 8th houses are located with the lord of the 4th, so the lord of the 1st and the 8th located with the lord of the 4th, death is caused by conveyances. So essentially what you're going to find is when you have the lord of the 1st and the 8th with another planet, whatever that planet represents, the 4th house deals with conveyances, will show death due to conveyances. Mars deals with battle, surgical tools, that can give death in that regard. Saturn can deal with starvation. Rahu can deal with poison. Jupiter can deal with drinking oneself too much. Venus and Jupiter can deal with death due to overindulgence, like diabetes. especially the kind that deals with eating too much sugar or gout. Those can cause problems due to overindulgence or even heart disease, right? So we can see these things. Now, if the lords of the first and second are located with Saturn, here we go, the lords of the first and the second, located with Saturn, death takes place by consumption of poison. Now, first and the second. The first is the body, second are the things that you ingest. Saturn deals with the capacity to expel toxins. Rahu's toxins, but Saturn's the capacity for the system to expel those toxins, to get rid of waste. So if we have the lord of the first and the second with Saturn, death can take place due to consumption of poison. Now, if those two lords, the lords of the first and the second, are with Rahu or Ketu, and they're located in the 6th, 8th, or 12th, one will then be hanged. Now, you need to think a little bit more deeply about this one. But Rahu and Ketu, what are those? Those are demons, had its head cut off. So it could be hanged, could be beheaded, could be strangled, anything of that nature. I'll do a few more, and then you can go read the rest at AstralVedicAstrology.com. Let's see here. So if the moon is located in the 8th, along with Rahu and Saturn, and that moon has a weak paksha strength, one can suffer from epilepsy, or one can suffer from troubles from souls of the dead, or from water. Now, trouble from souls of the dead, trouble from past memories, things that haunt you. That doesn't mean it has to kill you, but that can show a person suffering from that, people who have PTSD. Energetically, it can show you suffering from souls of the dead, but we're not going to get into that because there are too many people out there that talk about those things, that play around with things that they don't know anything about, and mislead others in that regard. So, if you can find someone who's a good shaman, good luck. And everyone's going to claim that they are one. Believe me, I live in Asheville, where, if you haven't read my previous blog article, where everyone's aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, pet squirrels are all either gurus, Reiki masters, enlightened non-dualist teachers, massage therapists, yoga teachers, natural food educators. So everyone gets into everything, right? In the same way that people think they can just deal with souls of the dead and energetic problems. But it's a very intense area. So we're going to try not to get into any of that, even though I spent a lot of time rapping on it there. But if you see the moon in the 8th with Rahu and Saturn, with weak paksha strength, then this person may seriously need to try to find someone who can help them out energetically. And again, I say good luck with that, because they're really hard to find. Now, if a weak moon is located in the 8th with Mars, Rahu, and Saturn, or if a weak moon is located in the 6th or 12th with Mars, Rahu, and Saturn, this is also said to give difficulty with epilepsy and trouble from dead souls. All right, so you need to watch that. And the other area up here about troubles from water, well, yes, that could indicate drowning. We have to remember that water, we have to sometimes read these things on a symbolic level. Water deals with emotions, difficulty with one's emotions, expressing emotions, processing emotions. So again, what's the modern day shaman? Well, trying to find yourself a good psychoanalyst. That can probably help in that regard too. Final little passage I want to go over. If the 8th house is located with malefics, or aspected by malefics, there is often defeat in one's undertakings. If there are benefic planets on the 8th house, there is no defeat for the native. So remember, the 8th house deals with our capacity to fight our battles. That's that moment of sudden, is it going to work, is it not going to work? When you're going into battle, that's just like making a sudden leap of faith. You don't know if you're going to win for sure. Sometimes you might know, but you don't really know. So that's where the sudden break and change comes in with the 8th house. That's how battles work. And if you have the 8th house located with malefics, well, that shows that battle, that transformation that's about to occur, is probably not going to be so good, which can give defeat in one's undertakings. If there are benefic planets on the 8th house, then there's no defeat, which means that the person is supported through grace to move through their transformations, to fight their battles well, to have that extra guidance and support. And I really find Sarvajita Mind to be a wonderful source for prajna astrology, because if someone comes to you and asks the question, am I going to be successful in this battle? Court case, divorce case, actually going out and beating someone up, whatever it might be. and you see that the 8th house is located with Malefics, the 8th Lord is in a difficult house, bad dignity, then you can say you're probably going to get defeated, so I want to try it. But if you see that the 8th house has benefics, Rashi aspecting that 8th house, benefics, friends, Lajatati of Ashta is impacting that 8th Lord, then you might more clearly be able to say you will be successful in this battle. So these are all wonderful things to keep in mind, specifically for prajna questions. And again, there's a video on this channel specifically on the astrology of omens, which is what prajna is, so you can search for that and give you a little more insights into what that means. That's the question of the moment being answered right now, without having to make an initial birth chart. You ask a question, the answer is in the moment you ask that question. You create a chart for that moment. All right, so we did have one final question here. Let's see, where was it? All right, so how do you determine if a dasha is going to go well? How do you determine if a dasha is going to go well dealing with the 8th house and the 8th Lord? So now considering the 8th house in regards to the dasha being a functional malefic or functional benefic. Well, if the 8th house Lord is good, in good dignity, supported by its friends, again, if you need to know more of how this works, please see my Lajatati of Ashta's course at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com under the MP3 audio and video download section. But if the 8th Lord is in good dignity, and if the 8th Lord is supported by friends, then that can show a positive time of gaining inheritance, wealth, doing personal exploration, gaining greater psychological health and understanding, better relationship with one's in-laws. When it comes to transformation, if there are transformational things involved from other areas of the chart, you'll find that the transformation leads to something positive and good. And we find that to be often the case where we have transformation that occurs that just leads to destruction. That would be difficult 8th Lord impacted by difficult planets, 8th house impacted by difficult planets. That's destruction. Destruction can lead to good things, but that will occur if the 8th Lord is in a good dignity, and if it's also situated with its friends, and the 8th house is well supported. Now the idea of functional benefics and malefics, well, this will also tie in the idea, which hopefully at some point in this video I'll have talked about, of temporary friendships. Again, you're going to need to learn about those. They're in most astrology books, but they're definitely in the art and science of Vedic astrology. And you'll see that if you can learn how the temporary friendships work, if we have a planet that's a temporary friend to another planet, then during that dasha, that transformation will be helpful and positive. If we have a planet that is a temporary enemy, then that can make that more stressful. The same will be true of benefics and malefics in general, because if it's a functional benefic, by its very nature it's benefic, that usually gives things with much more ease. So if you have an 8th Lord that's benefic, it might not be such a difficult change, or you're able to make the growth much easier. If you have an 8th Lord that is a functional malefic, well, it can still be good if it's in good dignity, but all malefics work you hard no matter what. All right, so it's still going to be harder work. So you got to remember that with functional benefics and malefics. Benefics give you things easier, and that can be giving you bad things easier too. And malefics, if they give you something bad, they'll really make it bad. But if they're giving you something good, they'll make you work for it. So the positive change will require that you work for it. All right, and that'll take care of it for now. We've got 3 more videos to go, the 9th, maybe more than that. How many? We've got 4 more videos to go, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th houses. And once we get through that, we'll move on to the Brihat Parashara Horashastra exploration, which will be a long, long course, and will probably be the beginning of the apprenticeship program that I have in mind. So we'll see how all that goes. So be well, and it was wonderful to speak to you again.